The gleaming medical center of Central Station towered above the other buildings, its crystal spires reaching toward the twin suns of the Stellar Union's capital world. Inside one of its pristine white rooms, Ambassador Rose sat perfectly still, her silvery skin reflecting the soft light as she tried to process the news she had just received. "I'm sorry, Ambassador," Dr. Mill said, his four eyes blinking in sequence, a sign of deep sympathy in his species. "The tests are conclusive. Your genetic structure is simply too different. Cross-species reproduction would be impossible." Rose maintained her diplomatic composure, the same calm face she had worn through countless challenging negotiations. But inside, her hearts were breaking. She had known this meeting might not bring good news, but hearing it stated so finally made it real. "Thank you for your thoroughness, Doctor," she said, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions inside her. "I appreciate your time and expertise." The doctor's assistant, a tall being with blue-tinted scales, handed her a data pad containing the full medical report. Rose accepted it with grace, though she had no intention of reading it anytime soon. The clinical details of why she could never have children weren't something she wanted to face right now. As she left the medical center, Rose walked past couples from different species, some with children, others clearly expecting. The Stellar Union was proud of its diversity, with hundreds of species living and working together. Many could even have families together, thanks to advanced medical technology. But not her kind. Not the luminary. Back in her private quarters, Rose finally allowed her composed exterior to crack. She moved to the window, watching the endless stream of hover traffic flow between the towering buildings. Her reflection showed what others saw. A tall, elegant being with silvery skin that seemed to glow from within, a characteristic of her species that had earned them their name. "Privacy mode," she commanded, and the windows darkened, giving her the solitude she needed. Only then did she let the tears fall, dropping like liquid starlight onto her ceremonial robes. Rose had known the odds weren't good. The luminary were one of the most genetically distinct species in known space. Their biology was so different that even sharing food with other species was impossible. But she had hoped, especially after meeting Tom. She touched the communication band on her wrist, where his last message still waited for a reply. Tom was a diplomat from Earth, one of the newer species to join the Stellar Union. They had grown close over the past year, their diplomatic duties bringing them together regularly. He made her laugh, challenged her thinking, and showed her new ways of seeing the universe. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts, another meeting requiring her attention. Rose quickly composed herself, using a cloth to wipe away the silvery tears. She had duties to attend to, responsibilities that wouldn't wait for personal sorrows. As she prepared to leave, her gaze fell on a gift Tom had given her. A simple potted plant from Earth called a rose, a joke about her chosen diplomatic name. Unlike most other species plants, this one had thrived in her quarters despite the unique atmospheric conditions she required. "Life finds a way," Tom had said with a smile when she told him about it. Rose straightened her robes and checked her reflection one last time. The perfect diplomat stared back at her, no trace of tears visible. She had a trade negotiation to oversee, and she would handle it with the same grace and skill she always showed. But as she left her quarters, she couldn't help but wonder if somewhere, somehow, there might be a solution no one had thought of yet. After all, if a simple Earth plant could adapt to living in her alien environment, maybe there was still hope for other impossibilities. But for now, she had a job to do, and Ambassador Rose of the Luminary never let personal matters interfere with her duties to the Stellar Union. 2 weeks after receiving the devastating news, Rose sat in her office reviewing trade agreements when her computer chimed with an unexpected message. The sender's name made her pause. Dr. James, Earth Medical Division. Ambassador Rose. The message began. "I heard about your case from Dr. Mill. I believe I might have a different approach if you're willing to discuss it." Rose read the message twice. She had already seen the best doctors in the Stellar Union. What could a human doctor possibly offer? Still, something about the quiet confidence in his words caught her attention. Later that day, Dr. James appeared on her office screen. He was older than she expected, with gray hair and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. His office looked cluttered, unlike the stark medical rooms she was used to. "Thank you for speaking with me, Ambassador," he said, shifting aside a stack of papers. "I've been studying your species' genetic structure. It's fascinating." "Fascinating isn't the word most doctors use," Rose replied. "They usually say impossible or incompatible." Dr. James laughed. "In my experience, those words often mean we just haven't found the right solution yet." He held up a data pad. "Did you know that human DNA has some unique properties? We're actually quite good at adapting." Rose leaned forward despite herself. "What do you mean?" "Well," he said, "humans evolved on a planet with extremely varied conditions. Our DNA developed unusual flexibility. We can eat almost anything, live almost anywhere. And more importantly," he paused, his eyes bright with excitement, "our stem cells have shown remarkable ability to adapt to other species' biology." He showed her a series of images, cellular structures shifting, changing, adapting to different environments. "These are human stem cells interacting with various alien tissue samples. See how they modify themselves." Rose watched the images, trying not to let hope build too quickly. "But my species is unique, yes," Dr. James finished. "But that might actually work in our favor. Your biology is so different that traditional methods were bound to fail. We need to think differently." He explained his idea, using simple terms that made complex genetics sound almost logical. Human stem cells, specially modified, might be able to create a bridge between incompatible species. It had never been tried before, but the theory was sound. "Of course," he added, "this would be experimental. No guarantees, but based on my research." He smiled again, that warm, confident smile. "I think it's worth trying." Rose found herself smiling back. "The medical council will never approve it. They're very traditional in their methods." "Ah, yes." Dr. James shuffled more papers. "I've already started the approval process. Having an ambassador as the first patient would help." And he looked slightly embarrassed. "I might have mentioned that this could improve relations with Earth." Rose almost laughed. It was exactly the kind of clever thinking she used in diplomatic negotiations. "You're not like other doctors I've met." "I hope that's a good thing," he replied. "Look, I know this is a lot to consider. Take some time to think about it. Read my research." He sent her a file. "But Ambassador, I really believe this could work." After the call ended, Rose sat quietly, watching the city lights come on as evening fell. The earth plant Tom had given her caught her eye again. It had grown since she last really looked at it, adding new leaves despite the alien environment. She opened Dr. James's research file and began to read. The technical terms were complex, but his notes were clear and thoughtful. More importantly, they were full of something she hadn't felt in a long time: possibility. Her communication band buzzed. "Tom," asking if she was free for dinner. Rose looked at the research file, then at the thriving earth plant, and made her decision. Perhaps it was time to believe in impossible things. The medical council chamber was silent as Rose finished presenting Dr. James's research. 12 of the most respected doctors in the Stellar Union sat in a semicircle before her, their faces showing various degrees of doubt and concern. Dr. James stood beside her, his calm presence reassuring. "This is unprecedented," said head counselor Reed, his tentacles rippling with agitation. "Using modified human genetic material. The risks are unknown." "With respect, Counselor," Dr. James stepped forward. "Every medical advance was unprecedented once. Human stem cells have already proven safe in other cross-species treatments." "But not with the luminary," another council member interrupted. "Their biology is completely different from any other known species. This could kill the ambassador." Rose felt her skin shimmer slightly. a sign of emotion her kind couldn't fully control. "I understand the risks," she said firmly, "and I choose to take them." "Ambassador," Reed's voice softened, "your position makes this complicated. If something goes wrong, it could damage relations between multiple worlds." The chamber erupted in murmurs of agreement. Rose noticed how they talked about politics, not about her or the thousands of others like her who lived without hope of having families. "If I may," Dr. James pulled up a new display. "These are results from our preliminary tests. Human stem cells adapting to luminary tissue samples. The success rate is remarkable." The council members leaned forward, their professional curiosity temporarily overcoming their skepticism. The images showed human cells glowing with the same silvery light as luminary skin, something no other species' cells had ever done. "Fascinating," muttered one council member. "But still too risky. The political implications." "Excuse me," Rose interrupted, her voice carrying the authority of decades of diplomatic work. "But I am not here as an ambassador today. I am here as a person, asking for the right to try something that could change not just my life, but the lives of countless others." She gestured to the back of the chamber, where several other luminaries had gathered to watch. "We have been told our whole lives that we must remain separate, that biology has created a wall we cannot cross. But humans," she smiled at Dr. James, "humans keep showing us that walls can be broken." Dr. James stepped forward again. "Members of the council, I've dedicated my life to solving medical problems others called impossible. This treatment has been thoroughly tested. The only thing we need now is the courage to try." The council chamber fell silent again. Rose could feel the weight of the moment, the possibility of change hanging in the air. She thought of Tom, who had held her hand when she told him about the treatment, his only question being how he could help. Head Counselor Reed spoke slowly, his tentacles now still. "The council will vote." He looked at each member in turn. "Those in favor." Time seemed to slow as hands. Tentacles and appendages of various kinds began to rise. Rose held her breath, counting silently. 5, 6, 7. "The vote is 8-4 in favor," Reed announced. "Permission for the experimental treatment is granted, with full monitoring and safety protocols in place." The luminary observers in the back of the room began to glow brighter, their version of applause. Dr. James squeezed Rose's hand, his smile wider than ever. "We'll begin preparations immediately," he said. "Ambassador, are you ready?" Rose looked around the chamber, at the doubtful council members, the hopeful faces of her people, the encouraging smile of her human friend. She thought of the earth plant in her quarters, still growing, still adapting. "Yes," she said firmly. "I'm ready to make history." As they left the chamber, Dr. James was already talking about preparation procedures, but Rose's mind was on the future, a future that suddenly held possibilities she had never dared to imagine before. The treatment room glowed with a soft blue light as machines hummed quietly around Rose. She lay still on the medical bed, watching as Dr. James checked the readings for the 10th time that hour. Her silvery skin had taken on a strange mottled pattern, the first sign that the treatment was having an effect. "How are you feeling?" Dr. James asked, adjusting one of the monitors. His face showed both concern and excitement, the look of a scientist on the edge of discovery. "Different," Rose answered honestly. "My skin tingles, and I feel warmer than usual." Luminary normally had much lower body temperatures than most species. Dr. James nodded, making notes. "The human stem cells are beginning to integrate with your system. The warmth is actually a good sign. It means your body isn't rejecting them." Tom stood nearby, having taken leave from his diplomatic duties to support Rose through the treatment. "The color changes in her skin. Is that normal?" "With this treatment, there is no normal," Dr. James replied. "We're in uncharted territory, but the pattern suggests the cells are spreading as intended." Suddenly, Rose gasped. A wave of heat rushed through her body, making her skin glow brighter than ever before. The monitors began beeping rapidly. Temperature spike, one of the medical assistants called out. Her metabolic rate is increasing. Dr. James moved quickly, checking readings and adjusting medications. Rose, stay with us. This is intense, but it's not unexpected. Your body is adapting to the new cellular structure. Rose gripped Tom's hand tightly as another wave of heat passed through her. Her skin now showed swirling patterns of silver and pale gold, colors never before seen on a luminary. Should we stop? Tom asked worriedly, watching Rose's face contoured with discomfort. No, Rose said firmly, despite the strange sensations coursing through her body. We knew this wouldn't be easy. I can handle it. Dr. James studied the latest readings carefully. The human cells are successfully bonding with her tissue, but the process is more aggressive than our tests suggested. We need to slow it down. He prepared a new injection, the liquid inside glowing faintly. This will help regulate the integration rate. Rose, you're doing wonderfully. Your strength is remarkable. As the new medication entered her system, Rose felt the heat begin to subside. The patterns on her skin continued to shift, but more slowly now. The monitoring equipment showed her vital signs beginning to stabilize. Fascinating, Dr. James murmured, examining the data. The human cells aren't just adapting to your biology. They're creating an entirely new cellular structure, something that's neither fully human nor fully luminary. Hours passed as they watched and waited. Medical staff came and went, recording every change, every reading. Tom remained constant at Rose's side, telling her stories about Earth to keep her mind off the discomfort. Finally, as the station's night cycle began, Dr. James announced what they'd been waiting to hear. The initial phase is complete. The new cells have successfully integrated. Rose looked at her hands, now shimmering with both silver and gold. Will my skin stay like this? For a while, yes, Dr. James said. It's a visible sign of the changes happening inside you. But based on our models, it should eventually settle back to mostly normal, though perhaps with a slight golden undertone. I like it, Tom said softly, squeezing her hand. It's like stardust. Rose smiled tiredly. What's next? Rest, Dr. James said firmly. Your body needs time to adjust to these changes. Tomorrow, we'll run tests to see how well the integration worked. But for now, he smiled warmly. You've made history, Ambassador. The first successful human luminary cellular fusion. No matter what happens next, that's something to be proud of. As the medical team began to clear the room, Rose closed her eyes, feeling the new warmth in her body. She was different now, changed in ways no one fully understood yet. But for the first time in weeks, she felt something else too. 1 month after the treatment, Rose stood in front of the medical council again. This time, Dr. James presented the results with barely contained excitement. The screens behind them showed detailed scans of Rose's new cellular structure. As you can see, Dr. James pointed to the moving images. The human stem cells have created a stable hybrid system. Ambassador Rose's body now has the ability to adapt to other species' genetic material, much like human DNA does. The council members leaned forward, their previous skepticism replaced by genuine interest. Even head counselor Reed's tentacles moved in patterns of amazement. The golden shimmer in her skin, one council member noted, it's permanent. A small price to pay, Rose replied, her skin now a beautiful mix of silver and gold that seemed to flow like liquid metal, especially considering what we've achieved. Dr. James pulled up new data. The really exciting part is this. Her reproductive system has begun producing cells that are compatible with other species. The impossible has become possible. The chamber erupted in discussion. Rose caught fragments of conversation. Revolutionary. Could help others. Change everything. A young luminary doctor stood up from the observation area. Could this treatment work for others of our kind? With proper adaptation, yes, Dr. James answered. We've already had requests from other luminary who want to try the procedure. And not just for reproductive purposes. This could help with medical treatments that were previously impossible for your species. Rose stepped forward. I volunteered for this treatment for personal reasons, but the implications go far beyond me. Think of the barriers this breaks down, the connections it could create. The news spread quickly through Central Station. By evening, the medical center had received hundreds of messages from luminary across the galaxy. But more surprisingly, other species began asking about the treatment too. In her office later that day, Rose read through some of the messages with Tom. Her skin glowed brighter than usual, a sign of happiness her kind couldn't hide. "Listen to this one," she said. "My partner is from the gas giants of Sector 7. We've been together for 12 years, but could never have a family. Could this treatment help us too?" Tom smiled, taking her hand. The golden shimmer in her skin seemed to pulse at his touch, another new and fascinating change. "You've given people hope," he said. "That's a powerful thing." Dr. James arrived with more test results, his gray hair messy as if he'd been running his hands through it in excitement. "The latest scans are even better than we hoped. Your body isn't just maintaining the changes, it's improving on them. The human cells are teaching your natural cells how to adapt." "Like the Earth Rose," Rose said softly, thinking of the plant that still thrived in her quarters, learning to grow in new conditions. A chime from her computer interrupted them. Another message, this one from the Stellar Union Science Division. Dr. James read it over her shoulder, his eyes widening. "They want to establish a new research center," he said, amazed. "Dedicated to human-assisted genetic adaptation. They're calling it the Rose Institute." Rose felt tears forming. They shimmered gold now instead of silver. All those years of being told it was impossible. "Humans don't really believe in impossible," Tom said, squeezing her hand. "We just see it as a challenge." Looking out her office window at the bustling station, Rose saw several luminary walking by, their silver skin catching the light. Soon, they might have the same choices she now had, the same hope. A whole species, isolated for so long, could finally truly join the galactic community. "What's next?" she asked Dr. James. He grinned, already pulling up new research on his datapad. Now we see just how many other impossibilities we can prove wrong." 3 months after the successful treatment, Rose sat in Dr. James's office, staring at the medical scan results in disbelief. Her skin was glowing brighter than ever, pulsing with waves of silver and gold that lit up the whole room. "Are you absolutely certain?" she whispered, her hand unconsciously moving to her midsection. Dr. James nodded, his eyes twinkling with joy. "Completely certain. Ambassador, you're pregnant. The first successful cross-species pregnancy involving a luminary in recorded history." Tom, who sat beside her, hadn't said a word yet. He just kept looking between the scan results and Rose, his eyes wide with wonder. "The baby," Rose started, then paused, still processing the news, "is developing perfectly," Dr. James finished, showing them more detailed scans. "See here. The child has characteristics of both species. The cellular structure is absolutely fascinating. It's created its own perfect balance between human and luminary biology." Finally, Tom found his voice. "Our baby is glowing," he said softly, pointing to the scan. Indeed, the tiny form showed the same silvery golden shimmer that now marked Rose's skin. The news spread through Central Station faster than a solar flare. By the next morning, every major news network in the Stellar Union was carrying the story. "Impossible PREGNNCWHEVD," read the headlines. "Human, LUMIN and ARI baby TEFIs all ODDs." Rose's office was flooded with messages from all over the galaxy. Many were from other mixed-species couples, sharing their joy and asking about their own chances. Some were from scientists, begging to study this breakthrough. But the ones that touched her most came from her own people. "My daughter cried when she heard the news," one luminary wrote. She's been in love with someone from another species for years. You've given her hope for a future we never thought possible." The medical council called an emergency session, not to criticize but to learn. Dr. James presented his findings to a packed chamber, explaining how the adapted human stem cells had made this miracle possible. "This isn't just a medical breakthrough," he told them. "This is proof that the barriers between species are not as fixed as we thought. With the right approach, with understanding and patience, we can overcome what we once thought impossible." Later that evening, Rose and Tom sat in their quarters. She had moved in with him shortly after the treatment succeeded. The earth rose plant had grown so much it needed a bigger pot, its flowers now showing hints of silver in their petals, as if it too had adapted to its surroundings. "Are you nervous?" Tom asked, his hand resting gently on hers. Rose thought for a moment. "Yes," she admitted, "but not about the baby. The medical scans show everything is perfect." She looked out at the stars. "I'm nervous about what this means for the future. Our child will be the first of their kind. They'll face challenges we can't even imagine yet. They'll also have opportunities we never dreamed of," Tom reminded her. "And they'll have us." A message chimed on Rose's computer, another mixed-species couple asking about the treatment. She had received hundreds like it already. "Dr. James wants to start a special medical division," she told Tom, "focused on helping other couples like us. He says now that we've proven it's possible, we can refine the process, make it safer and more accessible." "The Rose James treatment," Tom grinned, "has a nice ring to it." Rose laughed, her skin pulsing with happiness. She felt the tiny life growing inside her, a perfect blend of two species that were never supposed to be compatible. In that moment, she understood something profound. Their child would be more than just a medical miracle. They would be living proof that love could overcome any barrier, even the ones written into the very code of life itself. The medical center's special care unit glowed with an otherworldly light, a mixture of silver and gold that seemed to pulse with life itself. In the center of the room, Rose held her newborn child, a tiny being that shimmered like a star caught between worlds. "She's perfect," Tom whispered, gently touching their daughter's cheek. The baby's skin glowed in response to his touch, shifting from silver to gold and back again, like the surface of a living rainbow. Dr. James stood nearby, watching the monitors with satisfaction. "All vital signs are exactly where they should be," he announced. "She's the healthiest baby I've ever seen, human, luminary, or otherwise." The baby opened her eyes. They were human in shape, but had the luminary's characteristic inner light. When she smiled, the whole room seemed to brighten. "What will you name her?" Dr. James asked, making notes on his datapad. Rose and Tom exchanged a look. "Hope," they said together. It wasn't a traditional name for either of their species, but it felt right. Outside the medical center, thousands had gathered to celebrate. The news of the first human luminary child had brought people from across the galaxy. Couples of different species stood together, many holding hands or tentacles or appendages, all of them seeing their own possible futures in this moment. The Stellar Union had declared it a historic day. Screens throughout Central Station showed the official announcement. First, human lumin aora, che child bioran, 8 ninu eora begins. In the following days, as Rose recovered and baby Hope grew stronger, visitors came from everywhere. The medical council arrived first, their previous doubts forgotten as they marveled at the healthy child who represented everything they had once thought impossible. "The Rose Institute is already helping other couples," Dr. James told them proudly. "We've successfully adapted the treatment for 12 different species combinations. More are being tested every day." A week later, Rose stood before the Stellar Union Assembly, holding Hope in her arms. The Great Hall was packed with representatives from hundreds of worlds. Even species that rarely left their home planets had come to witness this moment. "Looking at my daughter," Rose began, her voice clear and strong, "I see more than just a medical miracle. I see proof that the boundaries between us are not as fixed as we once believed. That with courage, trust, and hope, we can overcome any barrier." She smiled down at Hope, who was watching the assembly with curious eyes. Humans have a saying, "Love finds a way." When Dr. James first suggested this treatment, many said it was impossible. But humans have a special gift. They don't accept impossible. They challenge it. They change it. And in doing so, they help us all change too. The earth rose plant from her old office now stood in the assembly hall, having grown into a beautiful bush that produced silver-tinted flowers. Like Hope, it was a living symbol of adaptation and change. "This is just the beginning," Rose continued. "Already, the Rose Institute has helped hundreds of couples start their own journeys toward having families. Species that have lived apart for millennia are discovering new ways to come together. And it all started because one human doctor dared to question what we thought we knew about our limitations." Tom stood beside her, and Dr. James sat in the front row, both of them beaming with pride. In Rose's arms, Hope began to glow brighter, her light reflecting off the assembly hall's crystal walls and creating patterns that looked like stars being born. "My daughter represents a future where impossible is just another word for not yet," Rose concluded. "She is living proof that when we open our hearts to new possibilities, when we trust in each other's differences instead of fearing them, miracles can happen." As applause filled the hall, Hope reached out toward the audience with tiny, shimmering hands. Her laugh, when it came, sounded like bells ringing in a new dawn, the first notes of a future that no one had dared to imagine before a human changed everything.